Hello everybody, I'm InTheLittleWood, also known as Martin, and welcome back to the channel. So a few days ago there was another brand new Hytale blog post. They seem to come around about once a week, and you guys all started prodding me on Twitter to cover the contents. So there isn't a ton of stuff that I can add to this conversation, but we can at least go through it, see what's inside of there, and speculate on a couple of things. So let's talk block tech. That's the technology behind the blocks inside the world of Orbis. And we're starting off with Rgb Tinting. So this is a clever little mechanic that they've implemented into the game, which helps you change the colours of the blocks of the world. RGB, for those of you that don't know what that means, that is really simple. It's red, green and blue. You set how much green, how much red and how much blue is in a certain colour, and it will affect the output. By using this system, it should mean that we can add more texture and more atmospheres to the areas that we create or control inside of the world of Orbis without ever needing to go into the model maker. So in the example shown here, the team have altered parts of this area to take on a more blue tone to give an air of mystery about things. But I have a couple of questions about things that I can see here. So firstly, let's discuss the bulk change, the grass. So after 2 steps down, the tone of the grass has changed enough so that the player's attention will be captured. But it only seems to have altered the RGB value of the leaves and not the dirt beneath them. Comparing it to the more vibrant blocks on the left hand side of the screenshot, you can see that they share identical dirt tones. So it seems to be only tinting the top half of the block, which I find really interesting. So I'm guessing this trend will occur for many of the blocks that Hytale themselves have produced. But what about ones that we make? Will we be able to specify which elements of our creations we're happy for others to alter like this? Maybe in the model maker, my most immediate solution in my mind is that maybe you have an extra layer on the UV mask. The UV mask, by the way, is basically the texture of the block or item that you've created. And what I'm thinking in my head is anything that remains alpha, which has nothing in it, stays completely the same. Anything that you make opaque with just a regular black pen tool or whatever else it may be, that is actually the part that you will allow others to change with these sliders. That could well be something that's not even a discussion just yet, or it's penciled in for way further down the line, but I just thought it was interesting that only half the block was altering when they did this. Alongside this, you can see the foliage and the tall grass seem to have taken on the same blue tint, and also the same smurfy fate has become of the mushroom. Now, to be fair, that mushroom could have already been styled blue and purple as another one, but I'm going to assume that you can change those as well. Probably the most prominent point in this whole picture, though, is the fact that the leaf blocks are really intriguing, because I was under the assumption that you would choose like a set area, and anything from that point going upwards in the world, you know, towards the sky, would then be changed to this blue tint. But it seems as though on the tree, only some of the leaves have gone blue whilst others remain green, and it's not even from like the bottom upwards. There's some higher leaves that are blue and lower ones are green, so are you having to manually select each individual block? If that is the case, I'm wondering what kind of tools we're going to have at our disposal to perform this. Like maybe we have to go into first person mode and we have like, I don't know, a paintbrush, and you do a predefined RGB value on it, and then you left click on a block and it transforms into the color you want. That way you can keep the same value and apply it to the surrounding area. Or maybe there'll be like a paint bucket tool. So you basically like click, stood on the spot, and the surrounding area around you will all transform into whatever RGB value you've set. And I guess the final one, to make this look the most legit when you're creating an area or tweaking an area, is there going to be the ability to do actual proper gradients? By that I mean, say we had like a 3 block gap. Could you choose block 1 and block 3, and block 2 would automatically colour in? Because bear in mind, not everybody is an artist and they might not be able to find that right tone, but if the game can figure it out for you, that'd be wonderful. Next up, we have got transition textures. So put simply, these textures are applied to an adjacent block to make the harsh lines in blocky games invisible. So instead of seeing the sand suddenly cut off in a very unnatural and rigid way, you can now actually see the grass is encroaching and growing over the sand, almost blending the two textures together. It's a really lovely effect, and I think it's going to go a long way to adding more texture to the world and softening those borders. It looks great. Following on from the discussion of tinting a moment ago as well, you can see that that same tint has already been applied to the transition texture seamlessly. It's great. So with 2 different tones of grass blocks here at the moment, we need to start asking the question of how does it prioritize which one will bleed into the other? Because in the blog post they discuss about how it's a per block basis and you decide which blocks they then decide to transition into. So you could maybe set it so grass never goes over stone, but it will go over sand. But I want to know what the priority is going to be if you have 2 of the same block that are created by Hytale themselves. One of them's tinted and one of them isn't. Which one wins? I'd be really intrigued to see the hierarchy there. And just before we move away from this, I don't know if anybody else noticed this in the picture, but it seems to be that there is like a depth of field focus going on. This could just be a Gaussian blur added in afterwards so we can focus on the transition textures here, or is that how the game is going to render? Closer objects appear clearer, further away objects are blurry, unless you're looking in the distance, in which then the foreground then becomes blurry. Typically when they have this inside a video game, some people really don't like it, and sometimes the systems can't keep up with what you're actually trying to focus on, so a hard toggle on or off would be appreciated. Next up, we have a brief video clip that introduces us to the 3 block types in Hytale. The first being basic, a simple 6-sided block with textures drawn on each face. The second is a little bit more elaborate. It's various different shapes and sizes that are created with a Hytale model maker, and of course they have textures and animations applied to them there. I'll refer to them as model blocks, I think, for now. And then BYEEE goes on to explain about the third type of block, which is known as a hybrid. This basically intersects a model block into a basic block to create this cool combo where things are just sticking out left, right and center. And this is a really good idea for everybody involved. It makes it more simple and more streamlined to get these ores to spawn in various different zones without having to draw entirely new textures. It means that you can have, I don't know, a grass block, some sandstone, regular stone, you can even have some, I don't know, brimstone or a netherrack equivalent later on in the game, and you can simply have the ore sticking out of it because it's a model block combined with the regular one. The world doesn't have to change how it looks, but the ores can implant themselves. There is one more type of block that I haven't discussed yet, and that's because they gave it its own little paragraph and demonstration. So you know, like in Minecraft, when you place a fence post in water, it apparently exhales just the right amount of oxygen to make sure that square space is devoid of water, right? Yeah, not in Hytale, thank God. In Hytale, we're going to be able to toggle any block in the world to be submersible. This meaning it can sit in the middle of any fluid-based block, whether it be water, lava, and maybe void gloop, if they decide to throw that at us, and it won't disrupt anything around it. This means if you're creating a creepy swamp or a sewer system, you're going to be able to hide things beneath the surface of the water without being a dead giveaway. And you can see that the most standout reason for this feature is so we can have beautiful underwater worlds. They're going to have coral, they're going to have plant life, they're going to have sunken treasures and ships, and everything shouldn't disrupt the water around them because they're meant to have been sat there for a long time. And this last idea probably won't happen, it's completely out there, but it would be really cool if you could set the properties of a block to be visible but allow players and objects to actually pass through them. Like imagine playing a Wizard's Castle adventure map or something and actually like phasing through the wall and stuff like that. It'd just be so cool. I could see people applying this method in some really creative and different ways. As we move down the blog post, they touch very briefly on the leaf blocks and how they're not a cube, which gives them a more natural feel and life in the world. And then we move on to ambient animations. So when a lot of people install mods for Minecraft, most people tend to enjoy that gentle swaying of the grass that you get, and also the same for the leaves on the trees too. That gives a real sense of movement and life to the world, which I think without it, the game does feel a little bit like a rigid Legoland. So in Hytale, they've got all of that and more. The more being that the grass actually reacts to nearby entities, that being mobs, players, whatever else it may be. As you walk your way through them, they brush out of the way accordingly with a really smart coding system. It's such a tiny detail, but like everything inside of this blog post, all of this is going to total up to make a really immersive experience. Let's talk particle effects. So in the blog post, Hytale confirmed that there will be a number of particle effects like running along a block, walking on top of it, hitting, building, and even landing in liquid-based ones for a splash. But what they've decided to show off here is actually the breaking and destruction animations of various blocks. So the characters hopped into creative mode and can now one-punch everything in its path. And as you can see, they all share that same puff of smoke when they explode, as well as a couple of bright speckles to boot. If you've paid attention as well, you'll have noticed that every single one has a unique colour based on the block that they came from. What's more though, is we can actually see that some of the blocks have unique animations layered on top of this. You can see splinters of wood fling off from logs, you can see grains of sand drop into the earth when a sand block is destroyed, or even pebbles bursting from rock blocks. It's really cool to see these individual ones. And a final little note on this animation actually is that from the harder materials like stone and wood, there also seem to be these kind of like anime impact lines that burst out as well. It's a nice touch. So then we arrive at the final clip of the blog post covering interactions and animation states. So let's hit pause right here at the beginning and appreciate the ambient lighting that both the lantern and the candle are both providing. Notice as well how the candle's flame is flickering away. Looks really cool. And as we approach our humble beginnings log cabin, I want to hit hit pause again because there's actually a few things going on here. So firstly, it seems as though the log blocks have somehow been shrunk or shaven down to be smaller than the typical standard block size and dimension. And what they've done is they've plopped it onto the end of the main body of the roof to give that slight embossment. Then beneath each roof block, there are these nice little nubs that add a little bit of shape to the front of the building, but they deceived me at first. At first glance, I thought that they were just a quarter block, which was already really handy to have inside of the game, to be honest, but upon a closer inspection and pausing the video, you can see it's actually only an eighth of a block, and it's still attached to the top half. So imagine the cube is sliced up into 8 equal parts, okay? There's 4 on the top, there's 4 on the bottom. What they seem to have done here is actually taken away 3 on the bottom to leave one at the very back corner, and that's left us with this strange 7-block beauty. Here's hoping that this level of customization is extended to all other block types inside of the game. Maybe not all of them, actually. Maybe not like sand and dirt, but at least, you know, sandstone, stone, wood, planks, all that sort of stuff. Maybe this method of like removing parts and segments from a block is how we're going to go ahead and create things like staircases and slabs inside of this game. Maybe that's how these stone stairs at the front of the house were formed. Having that level of control over building inside of vanilla would be really, really cool. We've got some nice wooden beams that are supporting the roof and keeping it held up, and then just before we knock on the door, we can see that the bottom layer of this hut's walls actually have a really fancy carved wooden block. Ooh la la! Alright, well let's go ahead and open this door. Oh, whoa, 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 full animation? Wow, okay. Slight shake of the door too once it gets to the end of the animation to give that sense of weight. I like it. So in the blog post, it did briefly quote Zero talking about the mechanics of how this works, and that the same type of method is going to be applied to chests, levers, lanterns. There's also a mention of trapdoors too, which is nice to hear confirmed for the game. Once we get inside, there's a little bit of furniture, a table, a chair, a floating shelf with a candle on it. Doesn't seem very safe for a wooden shack. And what looks like a buzzsaw. This, my friends, is what I assume is making this entire hut so spectacular. And I'm hoping that there's going to be equivalent for stone as well, because if you look at the back of the hut right here, you can see that there is a very intricately designed fireplace. Whether you use the same workbench or there's different ones for different materials remains to be seen, but I'm excited to find out. So there we are, that's it for today's video. There are actually more questions and observations here than I first thought. I looked at the blog post and was like, there's not really much I could say about this for a video, but when I start writing these scripts and really honing on stuff, there seems to be a lot of stuff going on. So that is a look at the block technology inside a Hytale, and I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think to this information? I'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, and suggestions in the comment section below, and if you want to see more Hytale content like this, then please leave a like on the video so I can see a strong positive feedback. And as well as that, if you don't want to miss the next one, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, yada yada yada. Bye.